And so it is. We do welcome back a Coptic minister and self-discovery facilitator, and not a graduate, but a continuation, Bonita Jacque. Bonita is a Coptic minister, spiritual coach. Once again, as I just mentioned, did co-facilitate the self-mastery course with Susan and Jim in recent years. And she is a realignment practitioner, soul genesis practitioner, and a pharmacist. At the last time she spoke back in, I think it was September, she had 13 more days to go, but who was counting at the time, and it's probably been completed right now, but we'll let her shed some more light on that of her journey over the past couple months. The combination of her science background with spirituality offers a refreshing perspective on life in this world and a unique understanding of well-being. Her professional purpose is to help her clients gain awareness of their divinity, how applying this step helps them transform their lives, and the understanding of how they approach the life can actually change the world. Tonight's topic with Bonita is it's all about perspective.
Hello, everyone. So I've recently taken another class, of course, and it is another Soul Genesis class. It's level 3. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that I learned about perspective and the things that influence that. So in 2006, my dad's estate settled and I was able to leave my full-time pharmacy job. And I started taking some natural health classes in Mount Pleasant at the Naturopathic Institute. And, I didn't really know what my path was going to be. Okay, maybe I'll be a naturopath. I don't know. I love the spiritual classes. I did not like the herb classes. They were just too much like drugs. I just didn't really care about those. And so, they say, find your passion. Well, I didn't have any idea what my new passion was going to be. And after a while, I realized that it was the same thing, but I'm holding this ball and I'm looking at my passion here of the human body and healing and Western medicine, but I needed to turn it around 180 degrees to find that spiritual and emotional healing aspect that became so important to me. So, part-time return to pharmacy, 14 years later, all these modalities and classes I've taken, I am firmly on my new path now. I'm loving it, working on myself and really working with my clients to help them understand their divinity. So this third level class I took, another Akashic record modality of Soul Genesis, had a clearing about perspective. And that got me to thinking about the things that form our perspective and the things that maybe misform it or distort it. Your perspective creates your reality, which then reinforces your perspective. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So how do we get off that hamster wheel? The class that I took had a clearing called Opening the Fourth Dimensional Gateway of Perspective. So one of my classmates was 83 years old at the time, and she had a perspective that she was going to be 84. Just a couple of days ago was her birthday. Is she still going to be able to do all the things she did? How much longer does she have to do these things? How much more can she learn? How much more? So she had this perspective that at 83, she was great. She was really cooking along, but okay, it's all going to be over at 84. So we worked on clearing that in the class. Is she limiting her lifespan by this perspective? Is she putting a hex on herself, so to speak? Does it just apply to her work? Because, our body hears everything that we say. So, this was an important thing for her to clear. And so we had to work with a practice client in class. And I worked with somebody that I'd worked with before. And I did this clearing, and I told him that it clears the perspective lenses that we see through, things that we've acquired in our family, religion, school, our career, our spiritual path. And we have these looping mechanisms where we keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And so this clearing then gets rid of those patterns of distortion and how we perceive. And that for him came up that it was affecting the areas of his spirituality and finance. So what he told me after I told him that was the two things that he asked for every morning. Let me trust that if I do my job, our finances will be in line. And please remove the blinders that keep me from seeing the world as it is. because he tends to see everything as a struggle. That's his core wound. So he wanted more information about what this was. So I told him it's a combination of things. It's the mental pattern that he uses to try to figure everything out. It's the shadow energy of manipulation and illusion that come from the areas of academics, religion, politics, the arts, philosophy, psychology, medicine. Then we factor in the soul wounds of abandonment, betrayal, and disappointment that are coming up for him with the belief that he can only rely on himself. I said, does that make sense? And he says, that makes perfect sense, too much sense. So how did I find out all of these things? I went into the Akashic record, asked questions, and got this information, and then did the clearing, which is prayers. So I wanted to talk about the things that can impact our perspective. So first off, look at your family of origin. I found this ancestral mathematics meme on Facebook, and it was kind of astounding. So in order to be born, you need 2 parents, okay, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 second great-grandparents, 32 third great-grandparents, 64 fourth great-grandparents, 128 fifth great-grandparents, 256 sixth great-grandparents, 512 seventh great-grandparents, 1,024 eighth great-grandparents, and 2,028 ninth great-grandparents. I'm sure we can go on, but from these 11 generations, you are the product of 3,838 people. How many struggles, how many battles, how much sadness, how many belief systems come through that line? But let's balance that with how much happiness, how many love stories, and how much hope was there. I thought that was really interesting. So each generation is impacted not only by the last generations, it's impacted by all of the generations. But in our lifetime, we're also affected by our family, but also religion, education, career choices, spiritual path. We have all these lenses or filters through which we express ourselves emotionally, physically, mentally. We live in our power when we've healed from those third dimensional illusions that don't serve us. These are illusions that we've adopted to hide our divine nature. You might think, well, who am I to fill in the blank? Write a book, have the love I want, be a teacher, go on this fabulous trip. You know, we're limiting ourselves so much. When we can move beyond this third dimensional operating system into a fourth dimensional heart perspective, we can realign, we can open, and move beyond those limitations. But our victimhood looping keeps us believing we're being done to, right? Why do they keep doing this to me? Not why am I creating this? I know that you here tonight know that we do create our own reality. But sometimes we get stuck in that victimhood unconsciously. So let's talk about some of the lenses through which we see our lives. What patterns do we run under stress? We have adaptation patterns. They're how we adapt to that stress. We do spiritual bypassing. We don't want to look at those things. We're just going to ignore those things and just do the good things. We repeat life lessons. We have alliances, meaning a group has some kind of a policy and procedure book, and so we just kind of hide behind those rules that we were taught. And we have lineages, which are the old belief systems, maybe not even from this lifetime. We have two-dimensional thinking, good and bad, right and wrong, we versus they, the good guys and the bad guys. And we figure things out with our mind instead of feeling them with our heart. Then we have our own shadow archetypes that play into our perspective. So it's just a sense of imbalance, a disruption, a feeling of dis-ease. So consider these shadow archetypes. We have the matriarch, the smothering mother, because it's a shadow archetype. We have the Amazon, the fighter who needs to balance the scales. We have the seductress, who uses her power to get what she wants through manipulation. We have the goddess, who uses magic or psychic abilities in the world of ceremony to get what she wants. We have the nun, who's holier than thou and may cover up her feminine attributes. We have the vampiress, who drains you emotionally and lives through others when she sucks the life force out of them. And we have the sorceress, misusing talents to manipulate situations for others and for her own purposes. We have the patriarch, my way or the highway. We have the wanderer, no commitment. We have the warrior, trades ethical principles for victory at any cost. We have the master. The only person that's going to take care of everything is him. We have the vandal, somebody who destroys others' dreams or potentials. And we have the Messiah illusionist, kind of like a cult leader. He'll make you think that you need him in order to survive. So now let's add in some possible shadow energies. Fear, illusion, manipulation, control, betrayal, self-sabotage, threats, confusion, projections or distortions. We have all kinds of life areas that these things show up in, can show up in some, could show up in one, could show up in all. We have our health, our spirituality, our intimacy and relationships, our fun and friendships, and our finance. How do we make sense of world systems when those people in charge make it up as they go in order to keep a specific belief system in place? You know, reality is what we make up in our minds, but then we have to live within these world systems. And what we see isn't necessarily true. We have negative filters that we perceive these through, and they're probably more apparent during all of these last political events going on. So the world systems that affect your perspective are academics, politics, government, the military, humanitarian systems, which means psychology, philosophy, medicine, religion, and art, sports, film, entertainment, and especially social media. Our soul wound themes are how we slip into a victim mode and begin this looping pattern. So these wounds are created at our soul's origination. They're also the childhood wounding we received, and they're things that have been imprinted from past lives. So I touched on these last time I spoke. There is the soul wound of abandonment. So when I get close to somebody, they end up leaving me. Displacement, where you feel like you never fit in. Injustice, nothing is easy. Everything's hard. It's unfair. Struggle is a constant uphill battle to get anything done. Betrayal, I am just waiting for someone to betray me. Everything may not be a betrayal, but to me it feels like a betrayal. Isolation, nobody understands the real me. I am better off alone. Invisibility, nobody notices me. And victimhood, why do these things always happen to me? Can't people see that I'm suffering? So when we have conscious awareness of our soul wound, we can then begin to heal it and stop that looping pattern. But it's easy to slip into our wounds because it's just like riding a bike. You never forget, that's always there. So you remember how I described to my client what was affecting his perspective. It's a combination of things, the mental pattern of trying to figure things out, the shadow energy of manipulation or illusion coming from the academics, politics, religion, arts, and medicine, factor in their soul wound themes of abandonment, betrayal, and displacement with the belief you only rely on yourself. Okay, now let's add in 3,000 parents and grandparents and the perspectives that they've shared down the line and the genetic lineage. So this is now what our perspective lenses look like. So, you know, how much can you see now? Everything is wonky. So my perspective, I think this is a great visualization of my perspective because I really can't see what's true. I can't see anything. So this process is transmutation, not transformation. So transmutation, let's go back. Transformation is like water or ice goes to water and goes back to ice. Transmutation is ice goes to water and it doesn't change back. So if we can get rid of the perspectives that we've had and not change them back, that's fabulous. So I did another perspective clearing for a client. She wants her house to feel like a home. But to her, this means she would have to have a new home with more space, to get rid of the clutter, to be worthy of a new home. This current perspective of not having this involves her thoughts, life lessons that keep repeating, her lineage, her two-dimensional good and bad thinking. It also involves the shadow energy of fear, sabotage, covetousness, confusion, with her shadow archetypes of vampirist, nun, messiah, illusionist, impacted by the negative world systems, filters of politics, psychology, philosophy, medicine, arts, film, entertainment, and social media that affect her life areas of spirituality, intimacy, relationships, and finance. And then we have soul wounds of abandonment, betrayal, injustice, struggle, and victimhood that all came up for her. Okay, what a big mess. How do we work on this? So it's that tip of the iceberg. Your conscious awareness is only that little tip sticking out, and you have all of these other things impacting your perspective that you have no idea about. So it's very complicated, and you can see why her current perspective might have precluded her from getting a new home. Could you work on that by yourself? Well, maybe over a couple of lifetimes. I have this sign in my office. Do not believe what you think. Why? Because it's my perspective. It's a reminder to me that my perspective could change at any moment. It could be distorted through any of the previous things we talked about. But getting clear and being rid of the gunk allows me to have a different perspective. But it's still a perspective. Could we ever have a divine perspective? I don't think we could if we're in a body. But I think we can get glimpses of it through meditation. So I actually had an experience this morning, obviously very timely. So I was doing day 13 of Deepak Chopra's 21-day meditation experience. I was distracted by a 100-pound dog who had her paw on my leg, wanting a snack. I was distracted by my husband snowblowing outside the window of my office while the same dog was woofing. It's a 100-pound Great Dane, so, she's got this good woof. The teacher of the Soul Genesis class had held some meditations, and one was to step into the zero of the 0 point field. So to actually see the zero and then to go through that. So in my meditation, I imagined I went through this big zero. I lifted my arms to the universe, and I was going to ask for what I wanted. But you know what? All those physical things faded away. I'd like to lose a few pounds. I'd like to have some of this or some of that. It just vanished. And all I could think of was that I wanted to ask to experience the divine. That was so amazing to me. It just really brought home the grandeur of the divine. It's amazing how much is involved in shaping our perspective, and most of it unconscious. It's really unproductive to argue with someone else's perspective when you see all that can be involved, all other 3,000 people. So be willing to honor a different perspective. You don't know what lenses and filters somebody else is impacted by. I mean, it could be the blue filters or the red filters or the pink filters. You honor my perspective, and I'll honor your perspective. That's what it takes to get along. I love this work. I believe it is so important, and we need to do more than survive, especially in these times. We need to be able to thrive, and that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonita. Wonderful. As we look to change our perspective on things, that to look at things in a different way that aren't serving us, how do you go about doing something like that? And it's like, you look at something, it's like, oh, I've always done it this way, whether it's an activity around the house or something with your relationships. How would you change that perspective and try to look at it a different way? Is there a tip or a couple of keys that you do?
I think you have to get really sick and tired of your perspective and wanting something else, and then going on that journey. I mean, that's kind of the journey we're all on right now, is how do we do this differently? I mean, look at Lori doing the Course in Miracles. There's some great information there of how to do it. For me, it's working in the Akashic Records and getting the base reading and then going on to do the perspective clearing. It's using any type of modality, whether it's something like Psyche or whether it's Reiki or whatever kind of healing modality. I think every little thing that we can do like that can impact our perspective, because it opens up new worlds that we're really not aware of. And I think the biggest thing is, is there a different way? Being aware you want something different.
It's definitely a good starting place for sure. Anyone have questions for Bonita and her presentation tonight?
I wanted to mention that earlier today I watched a meditation on YouTube that Eckhart Tolle just put out 5 days ago. And sorry, I've got my usual phlegm in the throat stuff. But anyway, it's called Notice the Little Things was the name of the video that he put out. It's on YouTube. And it was really quite kind of like right in line with what you've been talking about, Bonita, about how we're sort of programmed into these things that we think we know. And also about putting out there sort of like, I want this, I need this, sort of trying to manifest things. And he tried to make the point that that's not the way to that's telling the universe that you're in need, that you don't have it, and that's not going to manifest anything. So anyways, it was interesting. It kind of went along with what you were talking about, perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the name of the meditation again?
It's called Notice the Little Things.
Okay.
Yeah. It just came out. It's new. Just came out like 5 days ago.
Well, thanks.
Bonita, some time ago, I had seen a similar, going back through how many people, how many ancestors that you have that have impacted. Somebody impacted them and then they impacted you. And it was suggested that you pray for them, you forgive them, you're grateful for them, and ask for their guidance as well. So I thought that was pretty important and have added that to my prayers.
Nice. And I think that any healing we do also goes backwards, and I think it also goes forward. So, everything you do benefits everybody.
Yeah. And I'm going to add another one now. I want my wonkiness cleared.
But
just don't use the word want.
Yeah.
It means you're wanting.
No, wonky. Oh,
yeah, wonky, but I thought you said I want my wonkiness.
No.
Okay.
Oh, right. You're right.
You can get rid of your wonky, but keep your quirky, because that makes you who you are.
This is true.
One of the best examples of the use of perspective that I found in my life is when dealing with a situation that some would call a problem or just an opportunity to transform one thing into something else. What I have found is that if I perceive this situation as bigger than I am, then that perspective limits my ability to make a change. Whereas if I just change my perspective and see it as something small that I am much bigger than, then it becomes a whole lot easier to address that situation and to actually be effective at changing it. So that's one thing that I found, that a change in perspective makes a huge difference in how effective you can be in your life.
I think that's a really important statement.
And if I may, Wayne Dyer said it well when he says, you change your thoughts, you change your perspective, you change your world. And I think that's critical. And one of the ways I approach it with a lot of my clients is to look at creating different possibilities. And a lot of times that to change that perspective is to allow for possibilities above and beyond what you've created so far. So, yeah.
I have
very, very good talk. Thank you.
Thanks.
I saw, I was watching Disney Plus the other night, and they had an advertisement for one of their new animated movies called Soul. And it showed these little ball creatures, almost like a little ball of light, and they're all running around like they're on a cloud, and all of a sudden this thing falls right on top of a whole bunch of them, and the one that's out ahead of that says, "Oh, don't worry about that, that won't crush the soul, not here." And then a portal opens up and you can see the planet Earth, and they said, "That's for Earth, that's for planet Earth." So in saying that, life on earth is soul crushing, but you don't get that here. And I thought, well, that is something that I think a lot of people think, that life on earth is soul crushing. And if we could change that perspective, how much would change?
That would be amazing.
Did you see a sneak preview of that show, Michael Joy?
Pardon me?
Did you see a sneak preview of that? Are they like little orbs flying around? Or?
It was just, I was watching a different movie, and they would have advertisements. And so they had a little mini trailer of the movie. And I thought it was cute at first, and then it kind of hit home. And I said, well, if that's the attitude that we have, that earth is soul crushing, then that's what it will be.
For sure.
The one thing that we, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I don't have any questions, but that was very interesting and enlightening, Bonita. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Just going to be something for me to think about for a while. Can we ever come out from under the iceberg that's under the water that we can't see?
Oh, no, there's so much stuff that we're getting bombarded with. I mean, look at the news. Is it news anymore? No, it's all perspective.
That is if I may, there's an interesting technique I do with clients. It's called brain spotting. And it's actually done through the eyes. Where we look affects how we feel. And just by finding these two particular brain spots, you actually can tap into that lower wounded self. And then you can actually find where that higher, wiser self is. And it's quite fascinating when the client realizes and actually hears within themselves the wounded perspective versus the soul's perspective, and then the willingness to bring that soul perspective or that higher perspective into the wounds. And just by going back and forth with their eyes between those two vantage points, how it integrates the new perspective. It's rather fascinating.
Sounds very interesting. Is it similar to EMDR?
It's the offshoot. A guy that was doing EMDR with people, he saw the person go off the bar, if you will, the light bar, and he just had her focus on the spot where she was fixated. And that's how brain spotting came to be. And many of us who had been doing EMDR, now we're pretty much just doing brain spotting. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Very interesting.
Yeah. The eye of that phrase, the eyes are the window to the soul. Sure holds true.
Very much.
Which direction do you have the person look? Is it to the left, to the right, up, down, David? And different.
Yeah, they usually do a continuum. You go to the left or the right, and then from wherever they get more activated, then from that spot you either go up or down, higher or lower, if you will, and it's rather and then once they find that spot, then they just fixate it. They just stay with it for a while, and then in due time you find the other higher, wiser self by doing the same technique. And usually the higher and wiser part and the lower wounded self are usually on the opposite sides of each other in terms of the vantage point, if you will. It's rather fascinating.